Hey guys, this is Phil from the Goose Hummock shop, and doing a presentation today. It's going to be an introduction to tuna fishing. So really what it's targeted at is you guys and girls out there who haven't tuna fished before or may have tried it once or twice, thinking about getting into it. I'm going to cover a few things. I'm going to cover some of the regulations because that can be a bit confusing, and I'm going to cover the regulations on the East Coast. I've been trying to get hold of Noah to cover the West Coast, but I haven't managed to do that yet. We're going to go some of the gear. I've got some examples of some of the gear, some of the techniques. I'm going to give a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the areas around here because Cape Cod is kind of tuna capital of the world. It's fantastic fishing around here. And then obviously how to land one. You know, the hooking it's really easy because a tuna bait, tuna tends to hook itself. It's going to hit your bait at about 20 miles an hour, maybe faster, so it's going to do just fine on its own. But how do you land it? And then, of course, once you have landed it, how do you deal with it? And how do you process it? So I'm going to try and cover all of those. So I'm a bit ad hoc with stuff. So if we pile straight into the regulations, there's 3 categories of license. And predominantly this presentation is designed at the recreational angler. But I'll cover the other one first, which is commercial. So commercial is a way you see it on WikiTuna and stuff. It's the guys going out there to catch a big fish. And they sell it in the market. It's classified that they're allowed to keep fish 73 inches or above. They're allowed. It's actually done by quota. So the quota is annual by tonnage. It then breaks down to periods, so multiple months to a month. And even in the last few years, they've actually given restricted fishing days. So there was 4 days a week last year, for example, in 2024, where you couldn't actually target giant fish. And they legally have to sell it. In Massachusetts, they have to get a secondary license, and that is to allow them to sell the permit, and that's issued by the state. All tuna permits are a federal license, and important to note, they're linked to your vessel, not you. Okay, and you're only allowed 45 days to change it. So if you do it on the 1st of January, by mid-February you're locked into that category, whether you choose commercial, recreational, whatever, and you're locked into that for the year. Okay. And as soon as you retain a fish and report a fish, you're then locked into that category for the remainder of the year. The only way to change it is actually if you move boats and put it on another boat. So commercial, most of last year it was 1 fish a day. So you could capture 1 fish, 73 or above, kill it, bring it to market, sell it to a licensed fish broker, and then they take it to market for you. And at some stage down the stream, you tell you how much you're getting for it. Recreational anglers. So recreational anglers, quite the inverse, that you're targeting the smaller fish. And currently the regulations, you're allowed 2 fish a day over 27, under 48 inches, 1 48 to under 73 inches. And remember this, that a tuna fish is measured over the arch of its back, from the V in its tail, over the curvature of the body to the end of the bottom lip. Okay, and that has to be within those bands. And when you bring the fish to the dock, it has to be called what's hole in the round. So you can't take its head off, you can't take its tail off to get it in your cooler, because they need to be able to measure the length. Okay, and bear in mind that a tuna in the water, if you measure it in the water, you're flat line measuring it, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3 inches longer when you take it out of the water. So if you stick a harpoon in it, gaff it, generally kill the fish, and you find out it's a 74-inch fish after you measure it over the curvature, you're stuck because you can't keep that fish and you legally have to release it. In fact, a recreational angler legally has to release any short fish, i.e. 0 to 27, any 73 or above. You legally have to release the fish into the water, dead or alive. Okay, there is a subcategory called trophy that allows a boat to keep 1 fish a year. It's quota based by tonnage. It gets filled up very quickly. I personally don't recommend it. The reason I don't recommend it is you're not allowed to sell the fish. So if you go and catch yourself a 600-pound fish, you're going to take 450 pounds of tuna meat off it, and you can't sell it. So you have to have a hell of a lot of friends, okay, because it doesn't freeze very well and it doesn't last for long. Okay, so just bear that in mind on the trophy category. And by the time you get to the northern areas of Cape Cod, the quota's normally filled anyway. So that's the recreational. So just to recap, 2 fish a day, 27 to under 48, 148 to 73 a day. Everything else has to get released. Okay, and then you have the last license, which is called a charter headboat license. You have to have a license. You have to be a licensed captain for that, whether that be what's called an OUPV or a Masters. And when you have that, you can register your boat for what's called charter headboat, and you can have a commercial endorsement. What that allows you to do is on any given day, you can choose which category you're going to sit in based on the first fish you catch of the day. Okay, so it's kind of designed for the charter captains who commercially fish as well. So they'll take a charter out, they'll catch small fish so their guests, their paying guests can actually take the fish home. But if they catch a bigger one on a day, they have the ability to sell it if it's an open day in the market. Okay, so that's charter headboat. That gives them a slightly enhanced capture rate, as they allow 3 fish, 27 to 48, 1 fish, 48 to 73, and then when available, a big one. But bear in mind, if that charter headboat license, if he catches a 30-inch fish and decides to keep it, then he catches a 700-pounder, you know, 100 inches, he legally has to let the big fish go because he's already categorized into an enhanced recreational for the day. Okay, so that's the regs. I think the key things to do is the NOAA website has some really good information. They have a section, and on the presentation you can see the URLs to it. First one is where you actually get your permit and apply your permit. It's all really good to have that on you. I laminate it and keep it on the boat. Interestingly, with bluefin, you have to report your catch, okay? And you have to report it to NOAA. You've got 24 hours to do so, and it's quite a lot of detail. You're going to have to say where you left, when you left, where you went, what time you went tight, what kind of gear you're using, whether it's circle hook, hooks, trolling, live bait, whatever, how long you fought it, what time you landed it, where you came back to, when you came back. Okay, and if you release a fish, you just have to say you had released a fish. But it's important that you actually record the fish, because that's what the scientists are using as a basis to determine the health of the stock. Okay, so that's reporting. And if you're a commercial guy, you really need to keep on top of the news, because like I say, it's by tonnage. And by tonnage, what that's going to mean is you're going to have an instance where the quota is going to close as the tonnage comes up close. You normally get 36, 48 hours notice. But if you haven't read the news and you capture a fish and you bring it in, the fact that you haven't seen the news will not help you in your discussion with the environmental police or the Coast Guard. It's on you to do it. And I check it every single day. I find that's the best way to do it. 2:30 in the morning, have coffee, do the weather reports, check NOAA news. Okay, so that's kind of the an intro to the regulations. And if we now come on to the techniques, the traditional way of doing it is trolling. That's the old way of recreational doing it. And whoops, we troll things like this. This is called a tuna spreader bar. Okay, and what it is, you have a bird on the top. Okay, this is actually directional. So if I'm coming towards the camera, this is actually going to go out to my port side, and it can be switched to go out. So it's the other side, which is good because it gets it out of the dirty wash behind your boat. And we have a whole load of what looks to be squid fish swimming. And then right at the end, all the way back, you have one straggler. And what I like to say when I'm talking to people is, you know, think lines on the plains of Africa. They always hit the wildebeest at the back because that's the weakest one. And that's exactly what a spreader bar does. And then you also control this kind of thing. It's called a daisy chain, okay? And it's a single one, okay? It just has less drag in the water. And then on the end, it has another stinger, which has the hook in, okay? I have, so trolling is a great way of doing it. Ballyhoo is a Floridian fish. It imitates the northern saury. It's a very popular food fish for tuna. They love it. So we'll actually rig those in various different ways. I'm not going to go on to that in this presentation. It's another one. But if you look at probably the most exhilarating experience really is when you call what's run and gun, and you see fish breaking and you're actually casting in front of those breaking fish, trying to catch them on spinning or sometimes conventional gear. And the gear you use is this kind of thing. You know, this is actually a jigging setup because it's quite shorter. But you can see the size of this reel. This is an 18 or a 20,000 class reel. when you're striped bass fishing, snook fishing, jack fishing, using a 5,000 or a 6,000. So it's an order of magnitude bigger, and you use an 80-pound test line. Okay, this is a shorter rod for jigging, and the longer, slightly longer, 7.5 foot for casting. Okay, and we're casting this kind of thing. This is Ron Z, one of the greatest lures of all time. Ronnie was a local guy, made this, probably caught more tuna than any other lure. This is what's called a sinking espada by Strategic Angler. Merv hand makes these in the Carolinas. They're absolutely beautiful. So casting, great. You move on the fish, you see the birds working, you see the fish normally crashing, you'll see bait fish flying out of the water. You get up and you cast in front of them. But you can't always see them on the surface. Sometimes there's no visible indicators to the naked eye. So at that point, what you're really looking at is you're looking at your sounder. You're looking at your sounder, and you're going to see and mark tuna, at which point you can jig for them. And jigging, we use a smaller setup. You can actually jig these Ron Z's. You can also use metal jigs. Ironically, the Espada and some of the other brands will fast sink, so you can actually use these subsurface. And that's a great way of moving around. If you're trolling and things and you see a fish at 50 feet, it's probably not going to come up to a bar, but if you drop a jig on it, you might just get it. Okay. Live baiting. Live baiting in the north tends to catch the bigger fish. So if you're recreational fishing, I would personally recommend that you troll, you cast. Jigging a little bit difficult because, of course, when you cast at fish, you generally know what size class you're fishing at. When you're jigging, you have no idea what's going to hit it. Trolling tends to attract the smaller fish anyway, as a rule of thumb. But live baiting catches the big boys and girls. Okay, that's where the commercial guys, they'll either be live baiting or they might even be chunking. Around Cape Cod, we don't chunk, and we don't chunk because there's so many blue sharks and poor beagle sharks. It'll get ugly real quick. We tend to use pogies or menhaden. Mackerel are a great bait. Sometimes we use squid. We'll use bluefish as well for the bigger baits, especially on a kite. So there's a variety of baits we can use. They're all tuna candy, they're all oily. If you can get it, herring's fantastic. It just doesn't live very well in your live well. But live baiting is going to catch the bigger fish, and maybe not so much the right thing for the recreational angler. Okay. So let's talk about the gear in more detail. Like I say, trolling rods. Trolling rods really start at this. This is what's called a 50 class, and if I compare that, and this is, you can see how much bigger it is. This is actually called an 80 class, so it's just bigger. This has 80-pound test line on it. This has a 130-pound test line on it. The rod is stronger, stiffer. It's just actually going to take a bigger fish. And both of these rods have what's called a Winthrop terminator butt on, which I love. All my rods have this, and it allows me to have a rod in a bent position, allows me to have it in a straight position. Basically, if I'm on a harness and I'm lifting the fish, a straight butt will allow me to lift further, put more leverage on a fish. The challenge is when the fish is near the boat, if you see the angle of this rod, how high it is, you put a lot of stress on the top of the rod and you can damage it. Whereas if you bring it to the bent butt position, it's naturally nearer 90 degrees to the water. Allows your rod to flex parabolically more naturally, which is going to work much better. Okay. On the gaff side of things, didn't have a gaff with me today. The gaffs are just bigger than anybody's ever used for stripers, and it's just a stronger metal basically, because you're potentially putting it into something very heavy. It's going to thrash around. You'll bend a lightweight gaff if you're not careful. Harpoons, for the recreational guys, you don't really need one. You only need one when it gets really close to that, like 70 to 72 inch fish, which is a legal fish. That's going to weigh 190 to 220 pounds. Excuse me. So you might want to put a dart in that. The challenge is, if you're not quite experienced enough, as soon as you throw the harpoon and stick a harpoon in a fish, you've made the decision, it's killed. And then because of that measuring I said at the start of this presentation, if you find it's too long when you get it on the boat, it's too late, you've killed the fish. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Key thing for me is a swim hook. Okay, this is a swim hook. This is made in Italy by a company called Pratico. It's really good. It's just a giant boga grip, and what it allows you is to swim the fish. So if you can imagine when you're actually fighting a fish, you fight a fish for potentially several hours. Fish is exhausted, it's full of lactic acid. You want to get that acid out of it. And just like a sprinter, you know, it's a guy who does a 200-meter sprint in the Olympics. After he's done that, he does 100 meters, 200 meters warm down. And it's just to get the lactic out of them. And what you do is you open this like so. You get it in the lower lip, in here, and you actually pull it around. I actually put a dock line through here, and then I actually throw it off the side of the boat, and I'll tow a fish around. And a big fish, you'll potentially tow it for half an hour, 45 minutes to really get that lactic out of it. Then you're going to see the colour come back into the fish. You know it's feeling better. Then unfortunately you kill it. But what you're trying to do is to preserve the quality of the meat inside the fish. Next thing, tail rope. Cheapest thing in the box. I just use a dock line, create a loop on it. And the idea is you can use a gaff, you can lift the tail, put the loop around it, put it on a cleat. And at that stage, it's fair to say you've won. It can't escape at that stage. Then you have a kill bag. Okay, I have a pretty big boat and I can put a 100-inch fish in the hold. The problem is with center consoles is you tend to run them pretty fast. I'll come back from the fishery at maybe 40, 45 miles an hour and I'm just banging the fish like this all the way home. So what I do is I have a couple of kill bags, and a kill bag is just a giant insulated bag. Mine are 40 by 84 inches and they're big and thick. You put the fish in that, you pack it with ice after you've gutted it, and then you put it along the transom at the back of your boat because that's the part that moves the least. And if you put it there on the way home, it's not going to be banging around. It's going to be in much better condition when you get back to the dock. Okay, so gloves. You know, you can bear in mind you're using what's called hollow core or braided line, very small, like traditionally when you're fishing for striped bass. And I'm sure you know the audience listening, you've cut yourself on a braid. Can you imagine what it's like when you cut yourself on 200-pound test braid attached to a 300-pound fish? It will cut you to the bone or worse. So you really want a pair of gloves. I tend to wear, there's a company called Fish Monkey and Pelagic I wear. They're a padded glove, but I like the fingers out so I can keep my dexterity so I can still rig and stuff. And they have a nice big leather pad in the palm, and that's the bit that's actually touching the line. And whilst on that subject, you never, ever, ever wrap the line around your hands, ever. Because if something grabs it, something go wrong, the damage you could do to yourself would be extreme. Okay, belts and harnesses, didn't bring one with me. I use a company called Black Magic. They came out of New Zealand. They are bar none, in my opinion, the best belt on the marketplace. It has a strap that comes around your waist, sits under your bum, and it actually provides you a lot of lumbar support. And then you have what's called a plate that hangs over it. The rod goes into the plate, locks in there, and now your rod is effectively going to be locked out here somewhere. So what you can do is you can move around, it's nice and secure. You see these lugs here, you have clips from your belt going down to here. And basically to fight the fish, you sit down and that will bend the rod, and as you lift up, you reel. So you're using your whole body weight in your big muscle groups to fight a fish. For smaller fish, I use an Alutechnos plate, and it's just a gimbal plate that sits across my waist basically. That's great for small fish, and I use that for spinning as well if the rod has a gimbal on it. Okay. So like I said, I've gone through the lures a bit. You've got your daisy chains, you've got your bars. I use chuggers, I'll use deep divers. I use Nomad Designs DTX Minnow a lot. I use the CD30, another lure, and I use some of the big X-Raps by Rapala. And what I'll do is I'll run my bars out, and then I'll run these deep divers under the boat. Because the fish aren't frightened of a boat, they're actually attracted to it. They think it's a whale or something, so they'll actually come up and have a look, and you'll get them on those 30, 40 foot deep divers sometime when they won't come all the way up to a bar. So if we talk about the where to go, if we look around here, and you can see the map on the screen, at the north you have, just north of Provincetown, you have a place called Stellwagen Bank. So this, the southwest corner, southeast corner, and the various corners, and up the side of it in Middlebank. Very good fishing up there throughout the season. Peaked Hill is just inside that, closest to Provincetown. The bay, Cape Cod Bay, is a big fish fishery. The fish come in there chasing the pogies and chasing the bluefish. So recreationally, I wouldn't bother with that so much. I'd stay on the outside. East of Chatham, you've got what's called Crab Ledge, which runs up the eastern seaboard. You've also further out towards the buoys, towards the lanes, you've got places like the Regal Sword and things, which are bodies of water. The Regal Sword was a wreck, but just this huge body of water, like 10 miles around. It just attracts herring potentially, and then the tuna periodically will come in there as well. And then you have south of the island, so south of Martha's Vineyard, you have a place called the Dump, marked on your chart. The bite was really good down that way this year. Also, I've done very well for small fish traditionally. Then, of course, you've got the canyons, which start about 100 miles east of Chatham, and that's a whole different ballgame. You'll catch bluefin out there, yellowfin out there, you'll catch big eye out there, and the other pelagics such as wahoo, marlins, etc., etc. Really cool fishery. And obviously the presentation is mainly targeted at bluefin, especially if you go south of Martha's Vineyard and slightly east out towards the lane. You increase the possibility of getting to yellowfin as well. And certainly if you fish further down the coast, off of New York, New Jersey, the yellowfin get a lot closer to shore there. And that's simply because they're a warmer water-loving fish. So, and the way that the Gulf Stream works, it runs closer to New Jersey, for example, than it does Cape Cod. Okay, so it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of where to go. Landing it, okay? So landing it is the difficult bit. Hooking it's really easy because, like I said earlier, you're trolling potentially 5 knots that way. It's hitting your lure at 20-something miles an hour that way. The point of impact is enormous, so you very rarely have to do anything. Sometimes when you're casting or jigging, you'll strike into it, but I've found that tuna hit it so hard you don't really have to worry about that. So you've done the easy bit because they've done it for you. The first couple of minutes are epic. You get a fish screaming away, and the bluefin especially, they can take enormous runs. I've had fish, had a really big fish a couple of years ago, and it took over 700 yards on its first run. At one stage we were running the boat at 20 knots trying to catch up with it to get line back on the reel. So they really scream away, and on spinning gear, that first couple of minutes of the drag screaming is quite, gets the hairs on the back of your arms raising just thinking about it. So, but once you've done that, after a few minutes, it becomes a battle of attrition, because bluefin are just thugs. They're not like tarpon or sailfish or marlin where they'll jump around. If you're in deep water, they'll sound, so they'll just swim straight to the bottom. You drag them up, they'll see the boat, they'll just dive again and you can't stop them, and that can go on for hours. If you're in shallower water, say sub 100 feet, they are going to run, and that's where they just scream away from you, which is causing another whole set of dramas, because you have if you're in the middle of a fleet somewhere and your fish chooses to run, you've got to zigzag through everybody, through all the lobster gear and everything else to actually get some control of your fish. But that's the way they're going to do. What I suggest you do is you just got to keep the rod bent in half. You've got to swap the angler as regularly as you can, every 10-15 minutes or so, just because they're going to get tired. Don't misunderstand the fact that tuna are a lot stronger than you are. So it's a team sport. Fundamentally, it's a team sport, because somebody's going to have to be driving the boat, somebody is going to have to be communicating with the captain, and somebody's going to be on the rod. So at least 3 of you are busy all the time. And the more you can share the rod, the better. So take it easy, share it around, and you're going to gain on the fish. And you're going to gain line, and eventually you're going to realise that fish is swimming around in circles, pinwheeling, and that's why Tyler calls his boat the Pinwheel on Wicked Tuna. And as that fish is going around, the more you reel, the closer that circle gets. And what I suggest you do is, as that fish goes on the outbound swing of its circle, you're just trying to hold on, because that's how you lift the fish, because the fish, it's hooked here, it's trying to swim away, and it's just getting pulled up. And then when the fish comes round the circle and it's coming towards you again, that's when you can gain line. So gain like 2-3 turns of your reel, and repeat and repeat and repeat. And eventually you're going to get by the side of the boat. Okay, and like I said, if it's a big fish and you're confident it's within your size limits, you can harpoon it. If you harpoon it, I suggest you get it just behind the pec fin, because you don't want it right down the loins. Avoid, unless you're experienced, putting it in the head, because the gill plates are incredibly hard. The chances are you're going to bounce a harpoon off the gill plates, and if you've got line attached to it, the chances are you're going to break off. So get it right behind, and none of these hero like 7-yard shots. You try and do it so you're not actually letting go of the damn thing. So you're only throwing it like 3 yards, 4 yards tops. And if you're gaffing the fish, it's really important. You want to go over the back of the fish and hook it up, and try and hook it right up in the head somewhere, and then you're going to bend your legs and you're going to pull it as hard as you possibly can. And the reason you do that is you're trying to turn that fish and have that fish pointing at you, because if it's pointing at you, it can only swim at you. Whereas you'll see people, they'll hook it halfway down the back or something, just having a wild swing, trying to hook it and get some connection to it. The chances are if a 120, 130 pound bluefin gets its head down, you're probably going to rip the hook straight out your hand. And then you now lost it, you've lost your gaff. You're hoping the gaff floats, you're hoping the fish comes back. Okay, and then, like I say, it's not over until the tail rope's on. So what we'll do is we'll gaff it, we'll get it up in the head. It freaks out, obviously, because it's not very happy, and it will settle down after 30 seconds. On my boat, we just use another gaff, lean over the side, throw the lasso over, cleat it off, and then release the head gaff, so I've left the fish hanging there. Okay. So that's kind of like landing, and then you can go crazy because you've won. Okay, then you've got to think about, okay, how do I look after it? If it's a small fish, normally you get it in the boat. Like if you get a 40-inch fish, we normally bring it in the boat. You can rake its gills to fillet it. There's a lot of talk now about these tuna spikes, which actually I use on the canyons for yellowfin, and it's a spike that you put in and you basically put it right in the front of the forehead, and it brain kills it, stops it thrashing around. But also, if you get your 2 fingers, put it behind the pec fins, stab through with your fillet knife on the lateral line, you're going to stab it in the heart, and then it'll bleed out really quickly. Okay, and once you've done that, then it's a case of gutting it, which I'll come on to in a minute. If it's a big fish, you want to get your Pratico out, or you can use a gaff. If you do use, these are expensive, they're great, but if you use a gaff, common mistake is to hook it in the lower jaw. That's a mistake, because that's where, if you go to the dentist and they do an injection because they're working on your lower jaw, that hurts way more than your upper jaw. Sean knows this because he's just been to the dentist today, who's filming this, and it's because all of your nerves and nerve endings and blood vessels and things are in your lower jaw, because that's the bit that moves. Same principle for a bluefin. So if you are using a gaff to swim it, right at the back of the mouth, above the jaw, keep well away from the eyes, and you'll be okay there. And then when the fish actually starts to come back, you can punch the gaff back and release the fish. Now fine, it's got a piercing, but the fish is going to appreciate that rather than just being dumped after it's been fighting you for a few hours. Okay, get a fish into the boat as smoothly as possible. What I mean is, don't just drag it over your cleat, over the side of your boat, or banging against your engines on the way up, because you spent all this money on your boat, your gear, your fuel. The least you can do is make sure you look after the fish. What I do on my small boats, my big boat has a door, which makes it a lot easier. My small boat, what I do is I have my kill bag and I put it over the back of the boat. I have a 21-foot contender, and I put it over the back. I spray it off with a wash down so it's wet, and then I can either pull a fish over or use a block and tackle and just slide it up and over. So it's basically insulated all the way to getting on your deck of your boat. Okay. Gutting it, you want to gut the fish as soon as you've bled it, and we do it slightly different to a striped bass or something. What you're going to do is you're going to try and cut the gill plate off. I actually cut it with a sawzall for big fish, and I love the Dexter Tiger Edge blade, or Bubba do a serrated blade now. This is really hard. It's almost like you're cutting through bone. Cut that out, cut all the membrane out, basically cut about this much like you would a deer up its vent at the back, put your finger in, pull out the anal canal, cut that off. Then what I do is I put the saltwater wash down up its backside, and then I blow it through with salt water, and basically you can take the stomach, basically all its internal organs, you can pull it out through the cavity you've made by cutting off the gill plate. Okay, if it's the first time, don't forget the new boy on the boat has to take a bite out of the bleeding heart. That's tradition. It's pretty sucky, but everybody has to do it, or everybody on my boat does anyway. And then you want to put it in your kill bag, and you want to put as much ice as you possibly can in. Tuna are an oily fish. They're a fragile fish. They're like bluefish. If you leave them on your deck for 3 hours in 95 degrees, your quality of your meat will have gone down considerably. Get it on ice, put tons of ice. Do not be going to the petrol station on the way to the dock and get 2 5-pounder bags. You know, I take 200 to 400 pounds of ice on my boat, so we take a lot of it, and you pack it as much as possible. So we've given you an idea of kind of where to go, some of the techniques, the regulations, how to look after it. I hope that gives you an intro to tuna fishing. Feel free to call us at the store. It's info@themightyfish.com. If you want to drop us a note, we'll happily engage into a conversation. We offer a full outfitting service. We've done everything from a small boat to to Vikings. Me and my guys in the tuna team will happily look after you. And go tuna fishing. It's kind of like crack cocaine. It's really expensive. It's really addictive. I'm not sure how good it is for you, but it's epic fun. Okay, so tuna fishing is my drug of choice. I don't do the coke. Anyway, so there you go. Intro to tuna fishing, Captain Phil. Tell us what you want us to do next, and me or one of the guys will give the next presentation. Thanks very much.